So as we saw in the last video, there are a ton of ways to get drums into your arrangement. But even with these instruments and samples, you may find that they're just not quite right for your track, or you wish the kick sounded just a bit different or unique, or whatever it is. And that's where layering comes in. So the beauty of layering is that even with the millions of drum samples that are available to us today, by using layering, you can still come up with sounds that are truly unique and have not been heard before. So let's have a look at some examples of creative layering to transform some basic kicks and snares into something more desirable and unique. Now, there are two ways of layering kicks. There is the more known and widely used way of just dropping one kick directly over another and then using EQ to take the bass out of one and the highs out of the other. And then there's the other method of using the attack of one kick and the body or tail of another. Now, in this tutorial, I'm going to talk mainly about the first technique. That's like layering two kicks, so using, even two or three kicks, just drops in over one another using EQ. But I'll show you briefly what I mean by the other technique of using the attack of one kick and the body of another. And of course, you can actually mix and match the two techniques. But whichever way you do it, you need to make sure that the samples used are the same note as each other, especially for kicks at least, or you're going to start to get some horrible dissonance in the low end. So I'm going to take you through a few examples. I'm going to do kicks first. And first off, I just want to show you that second technique that I was talking about, where you use the attack of one kick and the body of another. So I'm just going to go to my media bay. Going through your kicks, you really like the body of one kick. So let's just say I really like the body of that kick, okay? It's got quite a nice sort of tail to it. Okay, so I'm going to drag that into my arrangement. And then I'm going to hunt down a kick that I really like the attack of. Quite like the attack of that kick. It's got a nice sort of punchy, high range sort of snap to it. So I'm going to drag that onto my arrangement. Here we've got our kicks. We've got our one that we're going to use for the body. Actually mute metrum for the moment. And we've got the one that I'm going to use for my body and the one I'm going to use for the main, just the attack. So I'll just set my loop region to 1 beat. Zoom in a bit. So literally what I'm going to do is just turn the snap off. And on the kick that I want to use just the attack of, I'm literally just going to bring that right in and use the envelope, just to give it a slightly smooth transition. And then on the other kick, the one that I want to use the body of, I'm just going to drag in the left-hand envelope so it takes out the attack of the kick. Let's just play that. Sometimes you just need to modify the shape of them a little bit. Okay, so let's just, so on its own, it's sounding like that. And then with the attack of the other kick in there, you can hear it's got much more oomph to it. It's a little bit loud, that one. Just balance those out. So that technique is literally as simple as that. So you will need to make sure these are tuned. Otherwise, like I said, you're going to get some pretty gnarly sort of dissonance. Okay, so I'm going to delete that and we're going to get on to just the normal sort of more traditional way of layering up kicks. So the kick that I'm going to make is going to be a house kick. And it doesn't matter if you're making trance, drum and bass, dubstep. The techniques for layering kicks are going to be the same no matter the genre. A lot of samples that you'll find in sample banks will be just the bodies of kicks with very minor adjustments. So a lot of these kicks here, not all of them of course, but a lot of them are literally just bodies. So they're just pure oscillator kicks and obviously recorded down and made in sample form. So what I'm going to actually do is, just going on the previous lesson, I'm actually going to use metrum to make the body of a kick. So I'm just going to play with that briefly just to create something that I like, that's nice and sort of housey. And just to throw it into the mix as well, let's just say that I'm working on a track written in D minor. So I just got to make sure that my kick is tuned to the rest of the track, or to that scale. So let's just find out where we're going. So I'm just going to set a point here. I'm just going to disable it so it's not affecting anything. And I'm going to set that to D, which actually isn't far off where we are already. Just needs to be a little bit lower. So I'm just going to tune this kick to D and just sort of give it the shape that I want using the pitch envelope. Okay, so that's like more in D. I don't want it to have that annoying snap. We're going to be giving it snap by layering it up. So I'm just going to and that's quite nice actually. I quite like that. It's got a nice bit of sub in there, which is the most important thing of this. Yeah, I do want it to have just a little bit of snap, but not too much. And I just want to make sure that it is tuned to D, which it is. Maybe I could do it just being slightly higher. And there we go. Okay, so that's it. Literally simple as that. I just made my body, or of course I could use a sample for that and then just tune it accordingly, either in my sampler or by just changing the pitch of it in Cubase, or whatever DAW it is you're in. But for now that's fine. So I've got the body, and now I want to start adding the other parts of the kick. Now in the previous video, of course, we looked at the sort of 3 parts of the kick. You've got the snap, the high end bit, or the sort of mid to high end bit. You got the main sort of punch of the kick, which is all sort of very low mids. And then you've got the sub of the kick. And of course, sub is the important bit that we've just tuned just now. So we don't have to worry about that so much. We just got to get the mid-range thud and the snap of the kick. So we're going to use 2 separate samples for that. Let's bring up Media Bay again. And let's just go through, find some, that's quite nice actually. That's got quite a bit of thud in it, I like that. Okay, well let's go with that. Stick it on one of the tracks. Let's just copy that across so it's on every beat. Now, of course, we've already got the sub provided for in the main metronome body of the kick. So I don't need to worry about tuning the sub of this kick. I do want to EQ that out so it doesn't conflict with the sub of this kick. So again, I'm just going to copy that Fab Filter Pro across. And that's actually not far off where the other kick is, so that's pretty much in tune already. Bobsy, if it's not, then I can just modify it in Cubase, although this isn't the best way of doing it. If I select it, bring up the info line, then I can change the pitch of it there by semitones or fine tune it, or in a sampler obviously, then I can just change the pitch of each individual sample quite easily. So of course, as we're using the main sort of punch of this kick, which is actually here, be that peak there. So I just want to make sure this is also in key, and that's fine. So F, that's fine, no problem at all. That is actually in, F is in the D minor scale, so I don't need to worry about that too much. So it won't sound funky when it's played. So F is what, 3 semitones away from D. So if I want to actually tune that to D, I can. So let's just set that to D, so we know where we want our peak to be. And if I select them and tune it down, So, okay, that is now tuned to D exactly, but really it doesn't sound very nice. So I don't like moving the kick more than sort of 1 or 2 semitones, but that's fine. We'll leave it in F as that's a note that's in the scale. Don't have to worry about that too much. For the mid-range punch, at least it's not a problem. Let's EQ out the sub of this kick. So I'm just going to change this to, say, a 48 dB curve and shape on a low cut. Enable it. So of course you can see that is the sub part of the kick, and this here is the main mid-range punch of the kick. So I'll just filter out the sub of the kick, but leave that nice mid-range sort of hit in there. And then again, I want to just set a high cut filter and just take out some of the high end. Just leaving most of the sort of meaty middle range in there. Okay, so let's unsolo that and just see what that sounds like with our body. Actually, that sounds pretty gnarly, so I'm going to just see if we can tidy that up a bit. So let's just try and use just the very attack of the kick. And that already sounds a lot better. So again, the two techniques of layering that I've showed you, the attack of a kick and the body of a kick, doesn't necessarily have to be two completely separate techniques. They can be used in conjunction with each other. So in this case, the tail of this particular kick is just not very nice. It's got a lot of sort of noise in there. Definitely unwanted noise. So as I shorten that, really just want that initial thud of the kick to add to my body. Okay, so that's fine, and I want to layer up another kick. So I want to get some nice snappiness, the sort of mid to high end part of the kick in there. So let's just open up Media Bay again. Too much hat on that one. That's quite nice. I'm not sure if it's exactly what we're after, but let's just drag that on. Better turn my snap back on. Okay. Yeah, and that's got a nice bit of snappiness to it. Okay, so again with this, very simple. Just going to load up another Fab Filter Pro Q2 and set this to be a high cut, or a low cut. Just solo that. So, okay, obviously we don't want any of the sub. We don't particularly want the mid-range, although there's not too much of it there. And I want to leave all of that sort of high end, all of this stuff up the high end, and some of the mids as well. Not too bad, somewhere about there. If I take out our mid-range hit, So I'm just tuning that because it actually does sound just a bit out. So it sounds like it's conflicting with everything else. So I'll just tune that down 3 semitones. And let's just double check that. So I think... So that's where we want it. We want it to be in D. There we go. Okay, so that's in tune now. We got our peak is now in D, or the peak frequency is now in D, and it does sound a lot better already. Great stuff. Okay, so there we go. Now we got that. Of course, we can then start mixing things in. If we want more high end, we can just whack up the volume on the high end part of our kick. If we want more sub, we can turn up the body part of our kick, and if we want more thud, then we can turn up that part of the kick. So there's one other very important thing that you need to think about when you're layering up drums, and this pretty much goes for all drums and maybe even some other sounds that you've got in your whole track. And that is when samples fall at exactly the same time. For example, all of these kicks are falling at exactly the same time. And you might well have hats and percussion and all sorts of other stuff, or the starts of loops, whatever, and they might all be starting at exactly the same time. So one thing that you want to watch out for is that you don't really want, or it can become a problem like 80% of the time, if you've got lots of different kick samples, hats and stuff like that, all falling at exactly the same time. And you can kind of hear it when I play it. So in this case, perhaps it's not too bad. The snap of this kick is just a little bit too much, so I'm just going to bring in the envelope a bit just to calm that down. Now hear the difference when I put it back. And it depends on your track, but sometimes you may want that sort of clickiness at the start of your kick, but a lot of the time it's actually going to become problematic, and it becomes particularly problematic when you're trying to mix down your track, and you're going to have this really sort of high frequency, almost just snap, overpowering the mix. As when you're limiting the track at the very end, when you've got your final mastering limiter on there and you're trying to get the maximum sound possible, sometimes these clicks can really cause a problem because they'll be pushing the volume a lot louder. So to avoid doing that, we basically do what I've just shown you. So instead of having that real obvious click at the beginning, which actually, especially when played very loud, is actually kind of a bit harsh, just bring in very slightly the initial attack, or give it a very slightly gentler attack. Now in something like Metrum, I'll just show you, you can do that with obviously the amp envelope. So I can choose to make the initial attack just a bit gentler, so it's not quite so full on. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much layering a kick. And like I say, that's going to be the same for all genres, drum and bass, dubstep, whatever. The sort of defining factor, of course, is the samples that you use to get the kick sounds. Now, of course, I made my own body using a drum synth. Because you don't have to do that, you could use just another sample. And, if you've got a sample that has a nice subby sort of low end to it, then of course you can just use that, or filter out any top frequencies if you need to, like I've shown you with these two samples. And if I wanted to, of course, if I wasn't quite happy that this kick had enough high end, I could add another kick to it or whatever. But there is one little thing that I want to show you, which can be quite handy and can really sort of get some cool results. And that's using not just kicks to layer with kicks, and that's using other sounds to layer with kicks. What I'm talking about is adding sort of percussive sounds, particularly, I find work really well. Of course, you can add hats and stuff like that, but then that becomes part of the top loop. So let's just have a quick look at that. So let's go to Media Bay again, and let's just go to the percussion section of, and this is, by the way, the Vengeance Essential Deep House Volume 1. So just go through and find sort of percussive samples. So something like that, perhaps. Let's just try it anyway. Set my loop region back to 1 bar. Now, of course, at the moment, that sounds pretty over the top, but you can kind of see where I'm going. So first off, I just need to tune that. Let's just copy across that fab filter. Now it's got a high pass filter on it already. That's fine. I'm going to leave that in there. I don't really want any conflicting too much on this. So at least it's got a nice strong peak here, so I can tell exactly. I'm going to put a point in there. You know, that's in C sharp at the moment. So I don't want it to be in C sharp. I want it to be in one of the notes that are in the scale of D minor. Well, that's fine. So I can actually tune that to D, no problem. Okay, so again, I'll just set my point on there. Just bring that down so it doesn't get in the way. And then I just transpose the actual sample. There we go. Just using a fine tune there just to get that really dead on D. So what I'm going to do is add some dynamic effects. So I'm going to add this one called VST Dynamics. Now this is a Cubase plugin, but it makes no difference. It's basically just 3-in-1. So all it is you got a gate section here, you got a compressor section here, and it's just exactly like the actual built-in gate and compressor that Cubase has, and will be very, pretty much exactly the same as any other compressor, any other gate. Same settings at least, and then finally a limiter section at the end. So what I'm going to do first is using the gate, I'm going to turn that on, turn the hold right down and the attack right down, set the release to about 50. I'm just going to raise the threshold until I start getting a very snappy bit too much. Okay, so that's fine. So I just have that playing on its own. So you can hear there, it's just cutting out the tail of that percussive hit. That's fine. And then using the compressor, so I'll turn that on, turn the threshold down a bit, turn the ratio up, release down, and then the attack, set that to about 12 to 14 or so to make that really plucky. And then bringing that back in. So without that percussive sound, and then with. So it just adds a bit more texture to the kick, and maybe that is not the best sound. So let's just get rid of that. Now I'm going to keep the track with the effects on, so the effects are pretty much set now, so I can just chuck in different samples and try them out, but with the same effect settings, so with the same gate and compressor settings. So I'll just load up Media Bay again. Okay, so let's try something like that. And there we go. So, like I say, I mean, it's just a couple of examples, perhaps not even the best examples, but you can see where I'm going, and just adding different percussive sounds and using just the two effects, gate and compressor, really bring out the snap, and it really makes it feel like, any percussion or whatever that you add to it is actually part of the kick. Now, of course, I can do the same with the other layers as well. So if I just turn off that for the moment, go into our other kick, and then I'll just copy that VST Dynamics plugin across. Just need to modify the settings a bit, so I need to turn down the gate. And again, so there you go, straight away, obviously I've already set the compressor up, so threshold down, ratio fairly high. and a quick attack. That's very important to get that snappiness and a sort of fairly quick release. And then the gate, obviously same as before, just a slightly lower threshold as it's a different sample, so the threshold will need to be changed. Adding the dynamics, the gate and the compressor really tightens up that kick. So there we go. For adding sort of a bit of difference to it, just try adding percussive sounds. It doesn't have to be percussion. It can be any sort of sound, especially any sort of sound that can be made to feel sort of kind of plucky.